Hey everyone, it's Saoirse, and today we're going to talk about a book that I think a lot of new audiences are picking up these days, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, there will be some spoilers in this video, because I want to talk about how things might play out later on. I have not read the other books yet. I plan to soon, but as of now, I've just read this one, and I have heard some things about the next one. Now, this was published in 1965, and typically I don't love literature from that time period. I find that the writing is a little dated, but with this book, I was, the first few pages, totally lost. But after that, I was so enveloped in this world that Herbert creates, which is, I would argue, not just science fiction, but also fantasy. We'll get into that in a little bit. But it just feels like something so completely new that, though there are some dated things, themes in there, it feels like it could have been written in kind of, not any time, but you wouldn't just look at it and go, that's the 60s. Which I think is important when you're world building. Now, I know this has been compared, it's compared on the back to Lord of the Rings. That's something that you can debate. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, and I wouldn't put it in that category, but the amount of world building is very impressive, and there's a glossary in the back, which I referenced about 1,000 times, because there are so many terms. So don't get freaked out by the first couple of pages where they say a million things that you've never heard before. You will get answers. Some things you'll just get from context, and others you will go to the back of the book for. So I want to say, kind of right off the bat, it's important to note that the main character of this book, who we want to be the protagonist, is not really written as a hero. So let me just read you this one sentence on the back. Set on the desert planet Arrakis, Dune is the story of the boy Paul Atreides, who would become known as Muad'Dib, and of a great family's ambition to bring to fruition humankind's most ancient and unattainable dream. Super vague. But so yeah, we want to root for Paul, definitely, if we don't know the story. We want to root for him, because you want to root for somebody when you're reading, right? I hate books where I hate absolutely everyone. And so I'm worried about how the series will go, and please don't spoil it for anybody who hasn't read the other books. We're just talking about this one right now. I've just heard that things get darker in the next book, in Dune Messiah. So I wanted to just touch on Paul. I don't think is written as a typical hero. We know he has a dark side, and he always talks about his dark purpose. He knows that he can't control what's going to happen in the future, but he feels something bad coming if he continues on a particular trajectory. So, there are some themes in this book that, depending on how you read it, feel kind of problematic. Some things I've heard people mention are the themes of the white savior and exploitation of vulnerable people in a difficult climate. There's religious manipulation, which is used to gain political power. And I think I'd like to hear other people's opinions, that the author is warning against all of those things. He seems to take a pretty strong stance in saying that all of that stuff is really bad, and that's part of the reason why Paul's not a hero. Obviously, this planet Arrakis has been exploited for ages for the spice, because it is so important in helping. Now, it's been like a few weeks since I read it. Helping, it's these certain people, I can't remember what they're called, but it helps them like guide or know, like get through the galaxy, I think, basically. There's some big concepts here, and I should say right away, I'm I'm not like a really political person. I vote, and that's about it. I don't like to get into government policies, and I find it really, really boring. I'm really glad that there are people that are so passionate about these things, or else the world would fall apart. But the political stuff in here is difficult to an extent. Like, I understood what was going on, but it's not as interesting to me as basically Paul like falling apart mentally because he knows something bad is coming. So after his family moves to Arrakis and his dad, the Duke Leto Atreides, is killed, Paul goes on this crazy adventure with his mom, basically trying to find a place where they're safe, and they end up joining up with the Fremen. And I will talk in the next video about differences between the book and the movie. I read the book first because that's what I always do, and I'd wanted to read it for a long time, but I had just put it off, and then the movie was coming out, and I was like, now I really gotta do it. And can't wait to talk about that because I really liked the movie too. So, so I think that the author is really warning us about a lot of things and showing us the repercussions of all of the bad actions that take place, such as exploiting people. And there's the whole crazy storyline of the Bene Gesserit like planting these seeds of thoughts about a messiah. Like, they go to Arrakis and tell the Fremen that there's going to be a messiah. And so then, of course, when they see all of the signs in Paul and his mother Jessica, they're going to think that's him. He's going to save them from the hell of being just ruled over and tortured by the Harkonnens, who are absolute crap. Do not like them. Anyway, so the author's strongly interested in ecology, and I thought that was really interesting. Like, saving the environment. I think there are so many ways to read this book, and that angle of environmentalism was a super interesting thing to focus on. I see this as an attack on modern politics, modern religion, again, a plea to put environment above politics, and it's also a warning of the danger of the Messiah narrative, because it just, I don't know, you can't really trust anybody who's saying they're going to save you from centuries of torture, because what are their motives? And I really like the Duke, because he seems to have more of a pure heart and just wants to help people. Like, he might be a little bit misguided at first when he gets to Arrakis, but he wants to learn how to best help these people that he's now been put in charge of against his will, because the Emperor told him to go there. So he doesn't have a choice. I've written so many notes on this, and it's all going bananas in my head. So I did look up some sort of discussion questions, things that come up a lot about this book, and one of them is technology. And looking at this world with very minimal technology, because of the Butlerian Jihad, I think, where they got rid of all technology in the world. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna look in the glossary for a second. It's the crusade against computers, thinking machines, and conscious robots begun in 201 BG and concluded in 108 BG. Its chief commandment remains in the OC Bible as thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind. So there's a lot about human computers, like the mentats that serve as sort of like counsel to higher up people. Like Leto has one, and the Baron Harkonnen has one. And then there's the Bene Gesserit, who are trained from birth to basically do the work of not just a computer, but this is where we get into Prescience and mysticism, and it becomes, I think, kind of a fantasy novel just as much as science fiction, because Paul has so many visions, and I find like the narrative is fascinating, the way that we have a third person narration and this omniscient narrator, and sometimes the narrator will tell us what's going on in somebody's mind. Other times we won't know what everybody's thinking, but the narrator, I don't know who it is, just goes into and out of people's thoughts, and so sometimes we know things before they're about to happen, like Dr. Yui is the traitor. That, and interestingly in the movie we can't get that, but I'll get that point across in the next video. I'm getting too excited to talk about the movie too. What was I saying? But yeah, so we hear a lot in Paul's brain about how he sees all of these different paths going out, depending on what choices he makes in the moment, and sometimes he's not even able to influence what's going to happen, though he does know all of the paths. And so it's very, not just suspenseful, but frustrating and upsetting, because you know everything's pretty much doomed, because it's just going further and further away from what he wanted originally, which is just to avoid a war that is incited by him. He knows his very existence, and whether he lives or dies could result in a war between the Fremen and whoever else in the world, because they have already decided that he's their savior. So it's kind of, he can't win no matter what. But he has to choose some course, and then that's the end of the book is so upsetting. It's so upsetting to me. And yeah, obviously spoilers, but when he decides he's got to marry the Emperor's daughter, and I just feel so bad for Chani, who loves him and has just lost their baby. It's just, yeah, it's super depressing. So I'm kind of worried about the next book, but also looking forward to it. So I think this book really shows how you can have a character that starts with good intentions and then becomes corrupted and self-serving. And the great thing about this book is that you see Paul fighting with that the entire time. He's fighting against that part of him that he knows is dark, and that he knows can incite more darkness in the world. So I'm just going to pull out a few things from the book, and one of them is the litany against fear, which is like one of the most used lines from this book, probably. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. And I really like this litany against fear, because you can use it in your life if you want to. I like the different times throughout the book when the characters use it, and it's a Bene Gesserit rite, but Jessica teaches Paul to use it, and it's just, I don't know, it's a nice thing where you can, it's kind of like meditation, like a, oh my god, what is it called? Mantra that you can go over to get yourself out of whatever panic you're spiraling into. Okay, you can't know all the ways something will end. So I like this little, I think every chapter starts with these invented excerpts from books written by the Emperor's daughter, the princess, which I think is really clever. What had the Lady Jessica to sustain her in her time of trial? Think you carefully on this Bene Gesserit proverb, and perhaps you will see. Any road followed precisely to its end leads precisely nowhere. Climb the mountain just a little bit to test that it's a mountain. From the top of the mountain, you cannot see the mountain. So that makes me think of Paul knowing he's heading up to, let's talk about it as a mountain. He's heading up towards the top of this darkness at the top of this mountain. And he can't see all of it. And if he goes all the way to the top, he won't be able to see clearly at all because he's going to be so mentally clouded by evil, because he has it in him to become evil. I don't know. I just liked that. Also, as somebody who climbs mountains, I just liked that excerpt. Oh, so this bit is about the Duke. He is looking out at the sky, and it's so sad and so cute how he's like determined to love this new planet even though he misses his home planet. A pre-dawn hush had come over the desert basin. He looked up. Straight overhead, the stars were a sequin shawl flung over blue-black. Low on the southern horizon, the night's second moon peered through a thin dust haze, an unbelieving moon that looked at him with a cynical light. So I feel like that shows us kind of some of the Duke's purity, the way that he looks at beauty, the way that he wants the best for the world and his people and all the people that he's now in charge of. And comparing that to Paul is interesting because I feel like Paul, he never really stood a chance to be a normal person or to become himself without the influence of his mother's Bene Gesserit training, because she wants to produce the Kwisatz Haderach and therefore has a male child instead of female, which she was instructed to do, which is just bananas that she can make her body do one or the other. But it's good. Hey, psst, psst. Oh no, my cat's getting into the treats. I can't stop him. The character development that we get in the book is, I mean, it's obviously a lot stronger than it is in the film, but yeah, I just find it fascinating because Jessica's character, I find myself rooting for her so much, and then at other times, I think she's this manipulative, kind of evil person because she... No, please, don't get the treats. Because she just totally influences how Paul is going to be, even so far as making him a boy. So, all of the characters have this multi-dimensional thing about them, which is just so true to real life, and also makes for a more interesting story because we don't know who's going to end up being evil, who's going to be corrupted by this dark purpose that is emanating from Paul. Oh, and then that kind of goes into the next point, which is about Paul, his Bene Gesserit training, making him more analytical than emotional. And there's the part where he knows his father has died, and he thinks, I loved my father. I knew this for truth. I should mourn him. I should feel something. But he felt nothing except, here's an important fact. It was one with all the other facts. So that part was just so sad because he does eventually, but initially he can't allow himself to feel emotion. Psst, psst. Come on, no treats right now. Come here, you crazy boy. Okay, we're almost done. But yeah, I think it's sad that he he'll never know what he would have been if he had just been allowed to be himself. And again, maybe everything I'm saying is just total nonsense because I haven't read the rest of the book, so I just know I've heard that he gets a lot worse and a lot harder to root for, which you definitely see coming in the first book. I just liked this quote: "When law and duty are one, united by religion, you never become fully conscious, fully aware of yourself. You are always a little less than an individual." So there's another example of the author or narrator warning us against the danger of religion. And I'm sure, like, this is why it's so interesting how many ways there are to read the book. I'm sure there are people who read it and didn't feel that way as strongly as I do, that this is a warning against religion, because I'm not a religious person and I think religion is dangerous. That's what I saw in this book. Just how it can incite violence and keep people not completely powerless, but they can be easily manipulated because they're looking out for this religious figure. So it's kind of like you can blindside them because that's not what they were expecting. Okay, this last thing I'm going to talk about for this video, and then we'll do the movie versus book next time, is this part about giving and taking, and it comes towards the end of the book. There is in each of us an ancient force that takes and an ancient force that gives. A man finds little difficulty facing that place within himself where the taking force dwells, but it's almost impossible for him to see into the giving force without changing into something other than man. For a woman, the situation is reversed. So, I read this part kind of trying to figure out one of my initial questions about the book that came very early on, which is, why is the Kwisatz Haderach male? Why does it have to be a Bene Gesserit male? Like, that's the thing that they've been working towards for centuries, is to have a Bene Gesserit that isn't a female, and I still don't understand. So if you have some theories about that, other than just this was written in a more sexist time, then let me know, because I can't figure out why a woman couldn't have been this all-powerful figure. Because that whole thing, I mean, unfortunately, at least in my experience, it often feels true that men find it very easy to take, while women we're so giving that the men who are better at taking can manipulate and abuse women who are just givers. But that is a really black and white statement, and just doesn't apply to everyone. So I'd like to know people's thoughts on what that means, the whole giving and taking speech, and why we need a male Bene Gesserit. Is there something that I'm missing? If it's something from a later book, don't tell me, please. Maybe I just shouldn't read comments yet. But that's all I've got for this video. Probably sound pretty silly because there's just a lot in here, like the politics and big themes that I'm not so much well versed on or really looking for, because I'm a lot more about character development, mood setting, and I loved all of that. So I really enjoyed this book. I thought I was going to be so confused the whole time, and it actually was so readable, and it went really quick. So, I loved it. Let me know what you thought. If you have any mean comments, don't bother making them because they won't show up. So, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you for the next video where we'll talk about the film.